Hello everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we'll be learning about multiplying and dividing decimal numbers. If you remember last week, I posted my very first student lifestyle/organization video, and you guys really seemed to like it, with a whopping 50 views, which is double of what my normal math videos would get. So I have come up with the schedule, and if you have any other suggestions, if I should do like an organization video every week, or if you think my new schedule works, which I'll be doing 3 math videos and then a student lifestyle organization video. If you have any other suggestions for any other schedules, just make sure to let me know in my discussion page and I'll keep those into account. But without further ado, let's head on straight into today's video. When you are multiplying or dividing decimal numbers, it's just the decimals that a couple rules you have to remember with those. So 16 times 4, you would get just 64. And the multiplication when you're multiplying decimal numbers is the same. But it's just that you'll have to look at some other rules. So let's say we have 1.6 times 4. So you're going to pretend, just so that we can calculate, that it's 16 times 4. And then we're going to go ahead and count the amount of decimal points behind the decimal point in the original number. So in this case, we have 1.6, and that's one decimal point before, so we will put it at 6.4. But let's say if it was 0.16, then we would move it 2 times because there's 2 numbers behind the decimal point. So you do this with any equations. So we'll pretend 0.25 times 4, we'll pretend that it's 25 times 4, and then we'll get 100. But then we will see, okay, there are 2 decimal points. There are 2 numbers after the decimal point. So this will tell us that we will be moving the decimal point 2 times to the left. So as you can see, the multiplication is the same. It's just there's a couple extra rules that you need to apply with these decimal numbers. Now let's go ahead and do another example. Let's say we have 3.255 times 2. So here we would pretend that we're just multiplying 3,255 by 2. And then we would count how many decimal places or how many decimal numbers are behind the decimal point. And we see there are 3. So we move from the last digit to the decimal point to the left 3 times. But I want to emphasize something. So as you can see in 6.7000, the zeros are terminal zeros, meaning they do not need to be there. However, when we do our calculations, make sure you keep the zeros there. Because if we remove them before we do the calculation, then we'll get the wrong answer. However, after we find out our decimal point, then we can remove the zeros. So make sure that no matter what, you keep all the digits that you receive until the end, and then you can cross out the terminal zeros. This is very important, and looking at my screen might help explain this. We're going to do one more multiplication problem before we move on to division. So let's say we have 0.420 times 3. So we calculate it just like normal, and then we will go ahead and see how many decimal points are behind the decimal number. And in this case, we need to move it 3 because there are 3 digits behind the decimal point, and then we'll get 1.26. Now let's move on to division. Now, everything with dividing the numbers stays the same. It's just there are, again, a couple of new rules we need to account for. There are 2 main rules I would like to discuss with you guys before we get into actually dividing. So the first rule is you may never, ever, ever have a decimal as the divisor when we're trying to calculate. And second, you may have a decimal number in the dividend. So if you don't get what I mean, we can never have a decimal number here. So 0.4, we cannot have that here. But let's say we are given it in the problem. How will we do this? So we agree that 1.2 divided by 0.4 is just 1.2 over 0.4. If we multiply both the top and the bottom by 10, then we'll just get 12 divided by 4. However, the second rule says we may have a decimal in the dividend. So what does this mean? So this means 1.2 divided by 4 is allowed. You just simply float up the decimal place and then divide like normal. But make sure that you remember where the decimal place is, because you want to make sure that the numbers after it are correct and before it are correct. Because in 1.2 divided by 4, if we get 3.0, that's incorrect. So make sure you keep track of where the decimal places are. So let's go ahead and do this problem. 0.12 times 0.072. So we can simply move the decimal point until we have a whole number in the divisor. And in this case, we need to float up the decimal point, and if we divide, we'll get 0.6. So there's just, as you can see, a couple new rules. However, everything stays the same. Now in this problem, we technically can have a decimal in the divisor, or the dividend, so that's why it's just 0.3. What about 200 divided by 0.4? So we would move the decimal place once, and then we would have 2,000 divided by 4, which is 500. And let's say we have 200 divided by 4.000. Well, we just float up the decimal point and solve like how we would, and we would get 0.020, which is 0.02. Now you guys are going to do 4 practice problems all by yourselves. Now these are all the equations, and you'll have 1 minute to solve all of them. Now for the first one, we have 0.42 times 3, and we just solve that like normal, and we have 2 numbers behind the decimal place, so we'll get 1.26. For the next one, we can just do 20 times 5, which is 100, and move the decimal place once. But this was also a trick question, because 2.0 is also 2, so you could have just done 2 times 5 and you would have gotten 10. Now for this one, we need to move the decimal place once for the next one. And we'll get 5 divided by 1,000, which is 200. Because we can never have a decimal in the dividend. However, in the divisor. In the dividend, however, we can. And in this scenario, we just float up the decimal point and get 1.5. Congrats, you made it to the end of this video. Whether it's you needed help with this concept, you wanted some extra practice, or you just wanted to review, I hope you learned something and got some extra practice in. It'd mean the world to me if you subscribed and hit the notification bell so you get notified every time I post a brand new video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you didn't give it a thumbs down, it just tells me if I need to change anything. And if you have any recommendations for my videos, you can always comment on my discussion page. You can also comment any student lifestyle videos that you want to see. Well, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video.